Sometimes the most ordinary days turn into the most extraordinary memories. What started as a simple thank you visit changed everything I thought I knew about friendship, age, and being truly seen. Let me tell you about the spring afternoon that reminded me life can still surprise you. No matter how old you are, my name is Helen, and I'm 57 years old. I live in a small house with a beautiful garden full of roses and a big tree with white flowers called a magnolia. My life had become very predictable. Every day was almost the same as the one before. I would water my plants, read books, and sometimes talk to neighbors. My son had moved far away for his job, and I had been divorced from my husband for many years. I wasn't lonely exactly, but I was living a very quiet life. That particular spring day started like any other. The sky was grey with clouds, but the air felt fresh and cool. I had spent the morning making lemon cookies and brewing chamomile tea. I was expecting a visitor, a young man named Daniel who was friends with my son. He was 26 years old and had helped me move some heavy boxes from my attic the week before. Daniel was always polite whenever I saw him. He had kind eyes and spoke softly. There was something about him that reminded me of my son when he was younger. That same quiet thoughtfulness. After he helped me with the boxes, I had sent him a text message thanking him. I also invited him over for tea and cookies as a way to say thank you properly. He replied almost immediately and said he would love to come. When I saw him walking up the stone path to my house, I noticed something different about him. His hands were pushed deep into his jacket pockets, and he was looking down at the ground. He seemed nervous or worried about something. I opened the door with a big smile, trying to make him feel comfortable. He looked up and smiled back, but I could see he was tense. We sat on my front porch in the comfortable chairs I keep there. The afternoon sun felt warm and pleasant. I poured the hot tea into 2 cups, and the steam rose up between us like tiny clouds. Daniel held his cup with both hands but didn't drink right away. His eyes moved around, looking at the garden, the old wooden swing hanging from a tree branch, and the colorful tulips blooming everywhere. Then his eyes met mine, and he stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite understand. I tried to start a conversation in a cheerful voice. "You seem very quiet today. Is everything okay?" I asked him gently. He took a deep breath, and I could see his chest rise and fall. "I didn't just come here for tea," he said in a low but clear voice. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've been thinking about for a long time, but I didn't know how to say it." My heart started beating faster. I felt a little nervous, wondering what he wanted to tell me. Maybe he needed help with something. Maybe he was in some kind of trouble. I folded my hands in my lap and nodded, silently telling him to continue. "I really respect you," he began, gripping his teacup tighter. "More than you probably know. These past few months, you've been like an anchor for me. I don't have many people in my life who really listen when I talk. But you do. You actually hear me." I felt my heart fill with warmth and also sadness. Looking at his face, I could see he was struggling with something important. "Daniel," I said softly, "I had no idea you felt this way. I'm really glad you feel you can talk to me." He gave a small, nervous laugh. "It's more than that," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I didn't know how to tell you because I didn't want to be disrespectful to you or to your son. But the truth is, I think I've developed feelings for you. Real feelings." At that moment, everything seemed to stop. The wind stopped blowing. The birds stopped chirping. Even my breathing seemed to pause. His words hung in the air between us. I didn't know what to say. This was not what I had expected at all. I kept holding my warm teacup, using it to steady myself because my hands wanted to shake. Looking at Daniel's face, I didn't see someone trying to take advantage or being inappropriate. I saw honesty. I saw vulnerability. I saw a young man being brave enough to tell the truth. even when it was scary. I chose my words very carefully. That's a lot to share with someone, I said quietly. And it took a lot of courage to say it. My heart was pounding hard in my chest, but not because I was afraid. It was more like the feeling you get when you're about to step into unknown territory, where you don't know what will happen next. Daniel looked down at his tea. I don't expect anything from you, he said. I just couldn't keep it inside anymore. It was eating at me, and I thought it would be better to be honest. For several minutes we just sat there without talking. The smell of chamomile tea and lemon cookies surrounded us. I felt something unexpected growing inside me. It was tenderness, not just for him, but also for myself. For the life I had built. For understanding how hard it is at any age to tell someone the truth about your feelings. Reached across the small table and lightly touched his hand. It was just a brief touch, meant to comfort him. Thank you for telling me, I said. Let's just sit here together for a while and breathe. We can figure out what all of this means later. We don't have to rush. He nodded, and his shoulders relaxed a little bit. The tea in our cups had gotten cold, but something else had become warmer. The space between us. The trust. The understanding that we were sharing something honest and real. The next morning. Everything looked different to me. It had rained during the night, and now the grass was covered with water drops that sparkled like tiny diamonds. As I went outside to get my mail, I kept thinking about what Daniel had said. His words had been genuine, coming from his heart, and that made them impossible to forget. I made myself coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the steam rise from my cup. My house felt too quiet and too full of echoes at the same time. After we had finished our tea the day before, we had sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Daniel had stood up to leave. He smiled softly, thanked me for the cookies, and walked back down the path with slow, careful steps. I had watched him go, not knowing if I should call out to him or let him leave quietly. Now, many hours later, the weight of what had happened still pressed on my mind like a heavy blanket. I couldn't stop thinking about it. By the afternoon, I decided I couldn't just stay in my house with all these thoughts spinning around. I cleaned my living room, arranged some books, and put on a light sweater. The sky had cleared up, and I could smell the wet earth mixed with the scent of lilac flowers coming through my open windows. My life had been very quiet for years. My son had moved away. My marriage had ended long ago. And although my life was stable and peaceful, it was also lonely sometimes. Maybe that's why Daniel's words had affected me so deeply. They reminded me that someone saw me as more than just their friend's mother, or a nice neighbor lady. Someone saw me as a real person. At 4 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Daniel. Thank you for listening to me yesterday. Would you be comfortable talking again? Only if you want to. I read his message twice. He was being careful and respectful, making sure I knew the choice was completely mine. After thinking for a moment, I typed back, "Come over at 5. We can sit in the garden." When he arrived, the air was warm and smelled like rain on stones. I had set up our small iron table under the magnolia tree. This time I have made peppermint tea. Daniel looked a little less nervous than the day before, but his eyes still searched my face, trying to understand how I was feeling. He sat down across from me and placed his hands flat on the table. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said quietly. "I didn't sleep much last night. I kept worrying that I had ruined our friendship." "You didn't ruin anything," I replied, and my voice came out softer than I expected. "You were honest with me. That takes real courage." He let out a big breath and nodded. "I just needed you to know how I felt, even if nothing comes from it. You've been so kind to me, and I didn't want these feelings to turn into something negative or confusing." I slowly stirred my tea, watching the leaves spin around in circles. "Daniel," I said, "you're much younger than me, and my life is at a very different stage than yours. What you told me surprised me, but it also touched my heart. It reminded me that I'm still here, still present, still alive in ways that matter. He looked up at me with an open expression on his face. I don't see you as just my friend's mom, he said. I see you as a person. Someone who listens. Someone who has depth and wisdom. That's rare to find. The sincerity in his voice made my chest feel tight, but I also felt a wave of responsibility. I wanted to protect both of us from making choices we might regret later. I value our connection, I said carefully. I don't know exactly what it means yet, but if you'd like, we can keep talking. About life. About whatever you need to talk about, without rushing into anything. He smiled, looking relieved. I'd really like that. We sat together drinking peppermint tea, while the sun broke through the magnolia branches, creating patterns of light and shadow. The garden was alive with the sound of bees buzzing around flowers. There was no urgency anymore, just a quiet recognition that something had shifted between us. Not a jump into something reckless, but a door opening into deeper understanding and friendship. As he left that evening, he stopped at my garden gate and turned around. Thank you, he said, for not shutting me out. I stood on my porch, holding my empty teacup, watching him walk down the street until he disappeared around the corner. Inside me was a strange mix of calm and excitement, as if my life had tilted slightly toward a new direction. I didn't know where this would lead, but I felt more awake and alive than I had felt in years. The white magnolia petals drifted down from the tree like snow, covering the path where his footsteps had been. Days went by, and Daniel's visits became a gentle rhythm in my otherwise predictable life. He never pressured me or imposed on my time. He simply came to visit, sometimes bringing a book he thought I might enjoy, sometimes sharing a story about his job or something funny that happened on the bus. I found myself looking forward to those afternoons the way you look forward to watching a flower slowly bloom. One late afternoon, I found him waiting at my gate. The sky was painted with golden pink colors, and the smell of jasmine flowers floated over the fence. His hands were in his pockets, but there was nervous energy in the way he held his shoulders. I could tell he had something important on his mind. "May I come in?" he asked. I nodded and stepped aside. He walked past the roses and the magnolia tree with measured steps, like he was preparing himself for something difficult. I led him to the porch where a pot of chamomile tea was already steaming gently on the table. "I've been thinking a lot," he began, his voice hesitant, "about what you said, that we don't have to rush, that we can just talk and be friends. I want to respect that." He paused, looking at the tea, then back at me. But I also can't ignore what I feel. I can't just turn it off. I felt my chest tighten as the air grew thick with anticipation. "Daniel," I said softly, "feelings aren't something to be ignored. But we do need to be careful and mindful of them. That's the tricky part. Being honest while also being respectful." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I know. It's just that sometimes I can't stop thinking about you. Not in a way that will just go away, but in a way that feels deep and persistent. I didn't want to burden you with this, but it's the truth." I took a deep breath, letting the tea's warmth seep into my fingers. "You're not a burden," I told him. "What you're sharing shows that you trust me. That matters more than you realize." The sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the porch in shades of orange and pink. For a long moment, we simply sat there, letting the quiet stretch between us. I realized that my heart was responding in ways I hadn't expected. I felt tenderness, curiosity, and a sense of connection that went beyond our age difference. It wasn't wild passion or reckless romance. It was recognition. Two people truly seeing each other without pretending to be something they're not. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. "Would it be all right if I stayed a little longer? Just to talk. Nothing more." I smiled, feeling a wave of relief. Of course. That's exactly what I want too. He leaned back in his chair, his body relaxing slightly, and began telling me a funny story about something that happened at work. It made me laugh so hard I felt it in my belly. And in that laughter, all the tension dissolved. It was replaced by an easy closeness and warmth. I saw him differently now. Not just as my son's friend. Not just as a young man with feelings for me. But as a person whose honesty had opened a door I hadn't even realized I was standing in front of. The garden around us seemed to hold its breath. The magnolia petals glowed in the late sunlight. Time moved differently in those moments. Slower, richer, more aware. I found myself noticing every detail. The curve of his smile, the warmth in his eyes, the way the breeze played through the tree branches. Each observation carried a quiet joy, a sense of discovery that I hadn't felt in many years. By the time he left, the sky had turned deep purple. He lingered at the gate, looking back at me with a mixture of hope and respect in his eyes. "Thank you," he said softly, "for letting me be honest with you." I waved goodbye, feeling a deep sense of gratitude for his presence in my life. As I closed the door, I realized that what had started as a simple invitation for tea had become something far more meaningful. A space where honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect all lived together, slowly weaving a bond that neither of us had expected. The quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was full and rich with possibility. For the first time in a long while, I felt that the best part of life might still be ahead of me. The days turned into a quiet pattern of afternoons spent together in the garden. Teacups warm in our hands, conversations warm in our hearts. By now, the initial tension from Daniel's confession had settled into something tender and comfortable. We didn't rush to define what we were to each other. We simply existed in the space between truth and trust. And I realized that sometimes that space can be the most meaningful part of any connection. One evening, as the sun was setting behind the magnolia tree, I found myself watching him from the porch. He was laughing at a story I had told, his head thrown back, his eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. There was a warmth in him that had nothing to do with age or past mistakes, or the usual boundaries that society imposes. It was simply his authentic presence. And in that presence, I felt a recognition of myself, of him, of the rare and fragile beauty that comes from true honesty. "Do you ever think about the future?" he asked suddenly, his tone quiet and thoughtful. I looked at him, surprised by the question. "All the time," I said, "but not in the way most people mean. I don't make as many plans as I used to. Now I think more about the moments I'm actually living in, the people I care about, the kind of life I want to lead each day." He nodded thoughtfully, gazing out over the garden. "I feel the same way. I've spent so long trying to be someone I thought others wanted me to be. And lately, being with you, I just feel like I can finally breathe and be myself." I reached across the table and lightly touched his hand. "Then breathe," I said softly. "Stay present in each moment. That's what really matters. Not the labels people put on things. Not the rules about how things should be. Not what others expect. Just this honesty, this laughter, this trust we're building." He smiled, that gentle, unguarded smile that had become so familiar to me. "You make it sound so simple," he said. But there was a lightness in his voice that told me he meant it as a compliment, not a criticism. The air smelled wonderful, like jasmine and damp earth mixed together. The garden hummed quietly with life, as if nature itself had accepted our unusual friendship. The evening sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting soft shadows across the table. The light highlighted the lines in my face and the silver in my hair, evidence of a life lived fully. I felt visible in a way I hadn't felt in years. Not just noticed by someone, but truly seen for who I really am. We sat together for hours, sharing stories, comfortable silences, and tea. There was no rush, no pressure to be anything other than what we were. Just a steady rhythm of mutual respect and gentle affection growing between us. And in that rhythm, I found something I hadn't expected. A renewed sense of who I am. A reminder that meaningful connection can arrive at any age, in the most unlikely forms, and still have the power to transform your heart. When Daniel finally stood up to leave, the sky had darkened into deep blue. He lingered at the gate with his hands in his pockets, his eyes meeting mine with quiet intensity. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting me be myself with you." I smiled, feeling warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the sun or the tea. "And thank you," I replied, "for letting me be myself too. For seeing me as more than just someone's mother or a neighbor. For seeing me as Helen." As he walked down the path and disappeared into the evening, I closed the gate slowly, wanting to savor the peaceful feeling that followed. The garden was quiet, but it didn't feel lonely. The magnolia petals glowed faintly in the moonlight, and I realized that life has an amazing way of surprising us. It offers moments of genuine honesty, tenderness, and emotional connection, exactly when we least expect them. I poured myself one last cup of tea. The steam curled up into the cool evening air as I sat on my porch. For the first time in a very long while, I felt fully awake, fully present in my own life, and deeply grateful. Grateful for a young man's courage to be honest. Grateful for the gentle ways his honesty had transformed my world and reminded me of who I am. The memory of those afternoons, of that rare and tender trust we built, would stay with me always. Sitting there in the quiet, I smiled to myself. Life at 57 was far from ordinary or boring. It was rich, unexpected, and still unfolding in beautiful ways I never could have imagined. And whatever came next, whatever challenges or joys lay ahead, I knew I would face them with an open heart, ready to embrace the honest connections that make life truly worth living. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is simply to listen with an open heart. And sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is someone seeing us, truly seeing us, for exactly who we are. That spring, in my garden, surrounded by magnolia petals and the scent of tea, I learned that it's never too late for life to surprise you. It's never too late to feel alive again. And it's never too late to discover that the most meaningful connections can bloom in the most unexpected places.